In this episode, I invited Matt Johnson back onto the podcast to talk everything about marketing, messaging, funnels, and ads, and how we do all of that for our clients and ourselves. So keep listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Today we have a returning guest. In fact, it's our first returning guest. And one of the reasons why he's here is because he does something very unique inside of our company, which is runs all of the marketing and the ads and everything for our clients. And if you haven't guessed, it is Matt. So Matt, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. One of the things that I wanted to talk about with Matt today, and I think it should be a really fun conversation, is, obviously we talk a lot about messaging on this podcast. It's what I'm known for. It's kind of what the company's known for. But we have to be able to combine that messaging with marketing. We have to be able to combine that messaging with ad creative. And it's fine if we have the right messaging dialed in, top of funnel, you're building an audience, you're getting the traction, all of that stuff. But then the next question is, well, how do we continue pulling that messaging through the funnel? How do we combine that with ads? And that's exactly what Matt does here inside of the company. And I actually had an interesting conversation with one of our coaches, Jess, the other day, and she does Facebook ads and she wants to kind of like change around what she does, is because she said something that I've known for a while. And I know, Matt, you've known this for a while. Mm-hmm. She said something like along the lines of people will hire an ad manager thinking the ad manager or ads is the reason why their funnel's not working or the reason why they're not generating sales. And she says, ads is like one of the last things. There's so many factors that go into ads, that ads aren't the reason why your ads aren't working. In most cases, there's things like offer, there's things like messaging, there's things like not knowing your numbers or how much to spend, or, all of that stuff that come into it. So let's start the conversation here. When we work with a client and, obviously Taylor and I and some of the other people on the team handle a lot of the messaging. What are you guys looking for in order to start putting together an effective campaign for our clients? Like, what's the first step?
Yeah. So, what we typically will look for if we're going to take on a client and we really want to produce a good return on investment for them is, them to be at some kind of indicator of upward success as it pertains to revenue. Mm-hmm. That's the big one. So it's like, what's your year over year? Because if your offer doesn't work, if you don't have something that's proven to work, then any amount of amplification, as we call it, isn't going to work, and you'll be amplifying something that doesn't work. So it's as simple as really understanding, okay, does this person understand their avatar? Do they understand their market? And have they matched their offer to that? It's a lot more difficult to get involved with someone that doesn't really know that, or you have to test a lot of that, because testing that takes a ton of trial and error that a small team like ours just isn't built for. We're built to put you through this machine that we've created that can really amplify a working offer. And that's really the difference. In all honesty, I would actually argue that you're better off with an internal team to do that testing first, or just yourself or in a VA or something like that. Do the testing first. And once you're ready to amplify, then it's like, you'd probably be at the place where we'd be looking to work with you potentially anyways. I mean, the biggest thing is, it's not even so much a revenue number. Like if you did like 40,000 last year and you did, 230,000, on track to do that this year, there's clearly an offer that's working. So coming in and, us producing, content that we know works well, to get, cheap opt-ins to drive more towards your offer, is definitely, that's really what we look for, is just a lot of kind of upward success as it pertains to revenue.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. So you talked about testing, And let's dive into that because I feel like a lot of people that are probably listening are probably just either starting out, they're probably under 500,000 a year, I
Mhm.
would assume. And so what we look for personally is someone who has that upward success that we can amplify. But when someone's just starting out, they're trying to figure out their offer, they haven't really done that many launches. There is this testing phase. And I think in that phase, a lot of people just go, I need to find the right ad manager. I need to
Mhm.
find someone that knows how to work with ads. When in fact, it's like, no, you actually have to get down and do the work. Right. And so, when you say testing, what would you recommend people start to do the right testing to find, the missing link or to find the right, the right formula of putting the right pieces together?
Yeah. So, as far like what kind of tests, I'll tell you about the tests that we do because I think it's relevant. And can we link to downloads in this episode and show notes?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. So we have a spreadsheet that we created recently for someone that I can just take the naming off of, and it's basically what we have created to follow someone or traffic through the journey that I'll kind of outline here. So if people want to download that, we'll just make it free. I'll send it over to get linked. Um, but basically, there's really just a few different things that we look at. So the ad itself is a combination of marketing collateral and messaging. In order to ensure that the ad is doing well, we typically look at things like, okay, what's our link click through rate? Not just our click through rate, but our link click through rate. What are we paying for that? We'll also look at um, not link click through rate, but our cost per click. So what is it costing us to actually get someone to click? And there's two different metrics for those that haven't been in Facebook ads too much. I'm not in it every day, but we always have people that run our traffic. But um, one of the things that we still look for is link click through rate and cost per link click. There's a cost per click and a click through rate. You do not necessarily want to look at those because they're going to be a lot higher. The reason for that is because your cost per click could be someone that clicked the like button or clicked on it to bring it full screen and on their actual mobile device or something. So you always want to look for cost per link click and link click through rate. So we look at those as indicators of, okay, is this resonating with the audience that we're sending it to? If you have really high costs for a link click and a low link click through rate, then you want to start looking at, okay, is it a targeting issue or do I need to kind of make my marketing collateral and my messaging that someone's seeing in the newsfeed more cohesive, more attractive, more something that someone is going to call out my audience, things of that nature, that all the things that you talk about.
Yeah.
That's step one in a vacuum. It's like, okay, is my ad working? I would look at simply if this is like, hey, I have 3 minutes to tell you, how to tell you if your ad is working. I would say, okay, look at your link click through rate and your cost per link click. If those are good, and I would say good's a relative thing here, but let's say you're above 1% link click through rate, and maybe you're like under, I don't know, $1.10 for a link click might be a good place to potentially start as a good barometer. Maybe again, those are wildly different depending on your goals and your key performance indicator, what you set for your key performance
And the
indicators.
industry that you're in too.
Right. But as just like maybe like a North Star to start with, those are the two metrics we look at in a vacuum to see if the ad is relevant to our audience. And that's the first step.
Cool. Okay. So you said ad is relevant to the audience. And you said something in there that was really interesting. You said cohesive, make sure everything is cohesive. And I think that's a big problem that a lot of people face is that a couple of scenarios. Number one is I call it disjointed funnel phases. I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about that, but basically what happens is a lot of people will have someone working on their top of funnel content, someone working on their opt-in page, then they hire a copywriter to do copy over here, then they hire someone else to do like emails, and they hire someone else to make the sales page. And before you know it, you have multiple people working on multiple phases of the launch and nothing is cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like doesn't flow. And then you have like an ads manager. You have just so many different people. So we're talking about, like, you're talking about ads and making them effective and all of those things, but sometimes, and those are just like straight looking at the ad. Here's
Yeah.
the numbers on the ad that you probably want to see just to make sure the ad is converting. But what a lot of people will also do is they'll look at the end goal of like how many sales were generated, and they'll be like, oh,
Mhm.
the ads didn't work, or the ads didn't do whatever. It's because in order to have a successful ad campaign, you need a cohesive funnel. It needs to flow. You need the first contact of someone watching your videos or seeing an ad to basically flow all the way through to the very end.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't understand that. And a lot of people don't realize that is like making sure the ad is converting has a lot to do with how are you warming them up? What does your runway look like?
Mhm.
And the numbers will be very different depending how good of a job you do there. So before we dig even deeper into the ad, can we move the conversation to talk about what do we do with clients before we even run opt-in ads to make sure our ads are going to convert? Like, what type of stuff are we looking at as far as runway? Are we doing workshops? Like, what are you seeing works best to prepare someone for that launch to start a cohesive ad campaign?
Got it. Yeah. So it's usually a combination of running campaigns for views, but also running things that you can think outside the box of for free giveaways or downloads or workshops or something like that. So, for instance, everyone does a webinar these days. Literally everyone has a free webinar. What if you decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to spend money on the upfront. I'm going to create a 6-month plan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack a irresistible, and I'll give this away. This is stuff that we've been talking about internally, but I'll give it away for anyone that maybe wants to jump on it and execute on it really fast. A cookbook. So what if we, like for us specifically, what if we had a product that we could put together a formula that would spit something out for a potential client or a potential audience member, someone that we want to turn into a fan, a dedicated fan and for life. What if we had a cookbook type thing where maybe a PDF that they punch some stuff in and then it spits out, or it's a website or something you can build. I'm sure there's out of the box solutions. You punch in data and then it spits out something for you and tells you something. You see this a lot with quizzes and stuff like, oh, take a quiz. So a quiz
Right.
would be a good option.
Which, by the way, I love quizzes. And for anyone listening, the reason why I love quizzes for this phase is because you get to expose a lot of problems to people.
Mm-hmm.
So you just go like, what type of entrepreneur are you? Or what type of whatever. And the way it works out, if you can structure the questions the right way, is they realize they're like at level 1 and 2, but there's like 3, 4, and 5 they haven't gotten yet. So it creates a demand gap if you can structure it the right way. But
Yeah.
I love quizzes. I love the QuickBook. But what are some other options?
Well, just to take that as an example, everyone is doing quizzes today. So it becomes less of a potent offer because everyone is inundated with quizzes everywhere, potentially. Again, test it, see if it works. If it doesn't, then I would recommend, because I always try to think like, what can we do outside the box?
And I think that's important. And I hope you guys that are listening are picking up on this, is that when someone or a lot of people are doing one thing, we're always looking at how do we do it differently? What is something that's going to stand out, stop the scroll? You're doing a pattern interrupt or something along those lines. And sometimes even just calling it something different. Like it might be a webinar, but you call it a workshop, you know, and people did that with started calling them master classes for a while until master classes caught on.
Exactly.
And so we're always looking at like, we're trying to stay above the trend with these things. But what are some other options? We have quizzes and the cookbook.
Yeah. So this idea of a cookbook, you could very easily, because you like the idea of like spitting out different solutions for them in different areas where they're struggling. You could literally take a quiz formula, just turn it into a cookbook. So someone enters a bunch of information and then, you cook up a recipe for them that they can implement that also outlines, here's how you should implement this. And based off the things that you entered in, it means that you're probably struggling here. So we're going to have you use this there. Just again, getting in depth. And I agree with you, like renaming, it could be as simple as renaming, but it can be even more powerful if you come up with some way to make it unique in the process as well.
Yeah.
So in the cookbook idea isn't new. Like Russell Brunson, that was his big thing. Like the Facebook ads copy cookbook. Like it's a recipe maker and it just spits out ad copy for you. So you'll see these things recycled, a year and a half, 2 years from now, maybe workshop will come back and stuff like that. We haven't done too often, but it's had a lot of success for different people in the past, are advertorials if they're really well done. So one that we did for a client was talking about comparing the online course business or the online course industry to the gold rush of like the early 1900s.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I wrote it.
Yes. Yeah. And the whole thing about that was, well, we ended up like rewriting it.
Yeah, right.
It was terrible.
Yeah, right. It was gold.
I rewrote it.
Pun intended.
It was, yeah. It was gold. If you're looking to not make any money, then I rewrote it, and then we had a ton of results. So
all right.
Depends on your definition of gold. No, but it was a really good advertorial. And basically, for people that know what an advertorial is, basically what it is, it's just a long article that gives a ton of information, but it slips in your offer. And the way that it's usually structured is as some kind of like statement made. Like, for instance, the whole idea that I had was Shopify. If you don't know what Shopify is, they're just an e-commerce the biggest e-commerce platform that you can set up a site and start selling physical products. Shopify has an e-commerce like State of the Union that they send out every single quarter. And it's just like, here's where the industry is at, et cetera, et cetera. So it was basically that. And then Brandon obviously came up with the gold rush idea and said, like, here's kind of like where the course industry is at. Here's like an update, as of this, year on where the course industry is at. We start talking about like how, it's like the gold rush of the early 1900s. And there's been a ton of people that have been there before you, and the land is getting kind of dry and stuff like that. But we always insert these things like, as we talk about in our Facebook group, which you can access here if you'd like, there's these little hyperlinks that you inject into it where people can get to more of your online properties than just reading this article. The article has to have a ton of value, though. You don't want to like just insert ads for yourself all over the place.
Well, can we talk about that for a second?
Mm-hmm.
And when we say value, we're not necessarily saying a ton of like how to step by step, because that article was basically a giant thought reversal.
Mm-hmm.
It was like we used a giant metaphor and we said to expose problems. And that's the key thing here is with these warm-up things is that every single one of them should be exposing problems. Like you mentioned with the cookbook, it's like, here's your results and here's your recipe. You might be lacking in this area. The quiz exposes where they're at versus where they want to be. The advertorial, again, is a giant thought reversal, exposing problems they didn't realize that they had. But yeah, when you say add value, you want it to add value. It shouldn't be ads all over the place. But let's just make sure everyone listening understands that value doesn't necessarily mean like a beautiful tutorial. It's like influence, persuasion, and communication should be going on in there.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So it definitely pays to really take your time writing it. But again, it's just basically an advertorial, something that is like that, what we just talked about, but it has you're hyperlinking with ways that you inject your more auxiliary offers. Not like you don't want to go like pitching like your, $3,000 program, be like, like we talk about here, claim your 15% off discount one time only. You want to more like be like, here's a Facebook group, or here's a download you can use to do this, or something like that. What we saw was like, we're getting people to hit that page for like 9 cents, which is just incredibly, incredibly cheap. And those are people that we retarget. So again, it's that idea of warming up. So those are a few different ideas. One thing that I've noticed is that I really believe that the people that are winning are just in love with the creativity.
Yeah.
They're in love with just like being like, okay, like let's think outside the box and come up with something and go try it. Yep. Like everyone's kind of looking for like a step-by-step guide on like how to do it. But it's like, ironically, like the step-by-step guide is the thing that's going to kind of hold you back.
Yeah.
You have to be able to just have fun with it. Like when we create ads, it's like, it's not like we're going, okay, like what's the step-by-step on how to create a successful ad? It's like, oh, what if we did this? Or for one of our more successful opt-in ads that we've had recently, it literally came from me surfing through YouTube at work and finding.
Wait, what? Me wasting company time and money.
And
doing research
and finding an ad from like a filmmakers group that I'm a fan of. And I saw this thing that they did. I was like, oh man, that'd be cool to try in an ad. And we tried it and it was massively successful. Yeah. So I encourage everyone listening to this to also become students of the game, like become students of other people, not like maybe joining their programs, but just fall in love with searching through your news feed, liking different pages to start getting their ads and start seeing what they're doing. Because if you start following the people that are winning, it's going to not give you the how to, but it'll give you the spark to create your own thing off. And that's incredibly, and that's all we're talking about with a cookbook and an advertorial. These are not new things,
Right.
but we can take them when they're out of vogue, if you will, and inject them to kind of be the new trendsetter of sorts, or something that's standing against what everyone else is doing or different than what everyone else is doing, even though everyone was doing it 5 years ago, but no one remembers. So
Right. Or just use like using something that was popular, but in a different way.
yeah,
So a lot of things,
100%.
we've used, we did a TikTok ad where I walked through the door and it was like this mobile phone thing. And
Yep.
we got a ton of comments on that. That was your idea. It got shared in a bunch of like ad Facebook groups and stuff too. Like people just loved it. But that was really nothing more than you finding a style of video that was really cool on TikTok. And then they use it as an entertainment purpose, but we use it for an ad and it worked great. So am I correct on that?
Yeah.
You're looking at me like, what are you talking about?
No, oh, no. That was
Okay.
it. I wish I could give you a window into like how I actually like, I don't know, maybe not to say that there's like fans of like my work or anything, but like I know that we've had some students that have been like, oh, this is like super cool. And they've gone and executed on it, which is awesome. It's
Right.
super humbling and super, I'm grateful to see that happening. But I guess the irony to me is like, if you could see how I just fell across that, it was basically like 7 p.m. I was laying on the couch after I had just eaten a large meal. I was probably had my phone like on my chest as I was like looking down with like a triple chin, just like mindlessly scrolling through as I see this ad. And I just like maybe made like an audible like or something like that. And then like went like, oh, okay. And then I just like screen recorded it, put it into an album that I have for ad ideas. And I was,
But it wasn't an ad though. It was just a normal video.
right. That's it. It was just the idea. It was the spark. That's all it was. It was like, oh, this might work cool as an ad. I rolled over and went to sleep and then woke up the next morning. And then we were like, oh, well, let's try this as an ad. So yeah, that's all it was. It was getting creative inspiration from a place. For me, it's ads. For someone, it might be like, oh man, I love how that person, at the end of their webinar did this, or I love how they have a tight 45-minute webinar. And oh man, I really love how at the very beginning of this, they, flip it on people. And instead of telling their story, they say, hey, look, I know you've been on webinars, webinar after webinar, and I get it. I'm just going to cut right to the chase. Why don't you try who's doing 10-minute webinars these days? Why don't you try a 10-minute? You know what I mean? Just like it was that spark to be like, okay, let me try this. So that's where, and again, that's where all these ideas come from. But that's right. That's how the TikTok ad.
I love leaning into those things too. Like whenever I do webinars, I always start it off with something along the lines of like, hey, I know you guys signed up for a webinar, but today's not a webinar. It's not gonna be the webinar where you get a bunch of fluff. I talk for 20 minutes about my story and I start doing all the things that people hate about webinars. And that automatically makes them assume that it's not, still is a webinar.
Right.
Webinar is just an online training.
Right.
But what I do is I reframe and I go, today's a training call and you better treat it as a training call. And then already in their mind, right in the beginning, they're like, okay, now they're paying attention because they're like, that's not gonna be the same old routine, boring thing that I've done a million times.
Yeah.
Okay, this is great. So one thing that you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I want to make sure that we really address this. So when you guys are coming up with your runway, there's two things. Number one is when you're coming up with that runway, it has to, like we talked about, having everything cohesive. So it needs to be cohesive. You don't want to just come up with some random freebie and go like, okay, I'm going to slap a cool title on this. I'm going to try to lure people in. And this is another thing I call lure marketing, which is I freaking hate lure marketing because it's all, again, disjointed funnels. Like, what can I say to get someone to this step? And then once they're on this step, what can I say to get them to the next step versus one cohesive pull all the way through? So when you guys are coming up with your runway things, you're coming up with a workshop or workbook, something that they can opt in for, it has to be tied into the offer in some way. So you need to be aware of what is the offer, what's the angle of the offer. And remember, when we talk about offer, I'm not talking about your program. Like you can have a mountain biking course with 10 modules and 50 videos, and you could make that a mountain bike course for beginners. And that's the way you frame it. Or you can say, this is the all-inclusive, everything, beginners, medium, and experts inside of this course. Same module, same training, but the way you're presenting it is different to a different audience. That's the offer. So you need these things to be connected to the offer in some way. It's not about just what's going to get the most downloads and whatever, because if you guys can have something for free that creates demand for your offer and you get 100 people and it costs you $1,000 versus you spending $1,000 and getting 500 people, but it not being connected to the offer, you're probably going to generate more sales off those 100 people. And most people don't really look at it that way, because you have to look at the runway thing is, yes, it's warming up audience, but it's also qualifying people. And I think so many people mess that up. So do you have any tips, Matt, of how to make sure it's connected to the offer? I mean, from your experience with our clients, is it just as simple as looking at a part of their offer and giving them a piece of it in the freebie? Is it like the same topics? I mean, what are some things that you've seen work as far as tying in the runway to the offer?
Yeah, I think, like you said, it can be really simple. And you'd probably have a lot more ideas than myself potentially on this. But what I will say, and one thing that I have noticed that a lot of people probably don't talk about, I don't know if I've heard you talk about, is proximity.
Mm-hmm.
Proximity to your launch. So that's a big part of it, right? If we get people in on an offer, 4 months before, we're even going to have our sales mechanism start, those people can go stale pretty fast
Right.
outside of evergreen. If we have an evergreen model, then then it's really close proximity.
Well, that's my next question is what's the timing like on these things?
Yeah. So typically, I mean, at most, we're probably looking at like 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks. And that would be, but again, there's multiple, there's a workshop, there's a boot camp, there's a free training on this. And then there's the video series. And then at the end of the video series, we have this. And again, like, you don't have to do all of that. But if you're like, let me try and warm people up, what I would recommend is have that unique, whatever it is, an advertorial, a workshop or a boot camp or a cookbook that you're getting running a bunch of people through for X amount of weeks. And start retargeting them with your video series or your webinar, whatever that looks like. Just try a 2-step sales mechanism to your cart open, cart close, versus, getting more complex with it. Like, you can keep it super simple, but just make sure that you're not really going past 8 to 10 weeks with a more multi-step. And if it's even shorter than that, I mean, we've seen clients that have a 2-week, runway, and then they're right into their sales mechanism. It's like a 1-month process it's a 1-month launch. So just make sure that a good amount of proximity from whatever that main piece of, or that valuable thing is that you're offering, whether it's a webinar or the advertorial cookbook, whatever it is, workshop, to your sales mechanism. And you're always mentioning it at the end of it, right? Like, at the end of it, it's like you're always throwing it in. You're always kind of like teasing it a little bit. Because if you're doing a webinar, like, you'll know before, like, your sales mechanism or something, you should have people kind of knocking at the door at that point at the end of it.
And I love this whole process, because what it does is it creates demand and momentum for the sales mechanism. And we see it all the time. I see it with some of the students that we have, is that they're like, oh, I got a webinar, did 500 people registered for it, and like 10 showed up. And it's like, yeah, because you didn't do any of the prep work beforehand. You didn't do any of the momentum building or the demand creation or any of that stuff. And we even see people go, like, they get into the video 4X, they do the entire program in 2 days, which is rushing the entire process. And then they're like, okay, I got to launch in 2 weeks. And it's like, yeah, if you're launching in 2 weeks and you're trying to figure out stuff now, like, too late. It should have already been done months ago. And I think the market's starting to change a little bit. Like we said, there's so many people starting courses and creating courses and building things online. You see all these webinars and all this stuff. So when you just run an ad to a webinar, it's the same old thing that everyone else is doing. Right now, the biggest launches that we've been doing have a runway in place where you're intentionally building up to the sales mechanism. It's no longer like add to sales mechanism. Like, and by the way, we're talking about launching here. Evergreen's a kind of a different story, but if you're going to do launches, this runway thing needs to happen. And so I want to talk a little bit about how to tie that thing into the offer. So a couple notes that I have on things that we do is, we're very big with thought reversals. So what I like doing is testing a lot of thought reversals before the runway, different topics and things like that, and see what are people resonating with? Like, what is something they didn't realize before? What's the biggest shift in perspective I can give them? And then create something around that. So I create something like, for me, we always say how-to content isn't how to build an audience fast. I would create some kind of workshop that exposed a lot of those problems. Like, here's what's happening. So I
Mhm.
try to expose something that they didn't realize was the problem, but at the same time, position the solution as something that's connected to my offer.
Mhm.
So I might say something like, how to content doesn't build an audience fast, but thought reversals are the solution, knowing that thought reversals is a part of the video 4X. So it's connected somehow now.
Exactly. Yep.
And then what we always do at the end of that workshop, so whether it is a workshop, whether it is a cookbook, whether it is workshop or whatever,
Boot
boot
camps.
camp, yeah,
Yep.
whatever it is, what we always do is the call to action is always going to be the next step, which is your sales mechanism. So what we always do is I always create a problem. So I'll say something like, okay, great. So we've learned thought reversals in this workshop. Now, if you only have thought reversals, you're only going to shift perspective, and that's only going to gain you traction for so long. You have to combine it with connection videos, and you have to combine it with how to, and you have to combine it with all these other things to really have this trifecta. And our video series dropping in 2 weeks is going to show you guys exactly how to do that.
Mhm.
So, although we added value, we warmed them up, we exposed a lot of problems, it was connected to our offer. The next step is the sales mechanism. And the reason why we want it to work that way is because now it's kind of like when people release a movie, there's trailers and there's momentum and there's buzz and people are excited. And then all of a sudden, boom, it drops and people just rush to go see it. So it's a different experience in that way. If you're doing a webinar and people are rushing to go watch it because you built up the momentum versus doing an ad straight to a webinar and people are like, I don't know if I really want to show up to this thing. So you get different results. So when we finally drop our webinar or drop our video series, we get a flood of people wanting to go watch it. They're literally wanting to go watch our sales mechanism. It's a different experience than what most people are going through right now, where they're like, I had a 5% show up rate on my webinar. It's like, yeah, because you didn't do any of this stuff. You didn't do the
Yeah.
runway. You didn't do the demand creation. You didn't do any of that stuff. So just to recap, when we do these runway things, the timing on this, you said was about 8 to 10 weeks maximum, right?
Yeah.
When you say 8 to
Yep.
10 weeks maximum, are you saying 8 to 10 weeks from cart open or 8 to 10 weeks from when you start trying to get people to opt in for the sales mechanism?
No, I would say from card open.
Okay.
Just because again, it'll depend on like again, like how much of a track record your offer has, right? And what the things leading up to the sales mechanism look like. Like for instance, like we've thrown around the idea of a challenge, right? Like,
Right.
and it seemed like something we might not do this time around because there's a little bit logistically, there's a little bit more involved. But what if you did, like in the fitness industry, there's 30-day challenges, right? So
Yep.
like if you have a 30-day challenge, maybe you're really pushing 10, 12, whatever it is. So there is some variance and it will depend. But I would say that 8 to 10 weeks would be to card open. So your sales mechanism is in there.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. So now that they have that freebie, the warm up, this experience is tied into the offer, it's been creating demand for the sales mechanism. We can take those people and we can run them straight to like the wait list, like get on the wait list for the sales mechanism, the video series, the webinar, whatever.
Mhm.
At what point does it transition to opt-in ads? So like obviously
Mhm.
we want to like try to get as many people into that warm-up phase, but not everyone's going to be in that warm-up phase.
Mhm.
So once that warm-up phase is done, now we can do the traditional opt-in ads, stuff like that. So how early are you like usually running and starting opt-in ads from the sales mechanism dropping? So like let's say we're doing a video series and it drops on January 1st. How many weeks before January 1st are we running opt-in ads?
I would say at least 2 weeks, but it's also going to depend on how much you spend.
Okay.
If we're doing a massive launch and we're spending $300,000, $400,000 on this launch, we'll need a much more time to scale our ad spend. But for most people probably listening, I would say you're probably looking around 2 weeks at a minimum. If you have less ad spend, if you're like, oh man, I can only spend like, I don't know, $1,000, $1,200, a week might even be perfectly fine because that daily spend will break down to a pretty good chunk to be able to accommodate, a couple ad sets and a few different ad creatives.
Cool. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. So just to kind of bring you guys into the loop of where messaging fits into all of this, what I like to do is we run a lot of content top of funnel before, like I love testing a lot of different thought reversals, finding different angles and seeing what people resonate with. And then obviously if you go through their video 4X process, you know how to already tie those thought reversals into the offer. It's literally as simple as just figuring out what are the problems you solve, what are the misconceptions people have, testing them, taking that same kind of message, running it through the warm-up phase, that whatever that freebie is going to be to warm them up. And then we continue carrying that message through the opt-in. So now for me, for example, the opt-in might say something like, learn how to create the most engaging content that creates demand, which is still in alignment with what our runway stuff was, pull people through. Now the sales mechanism content will essentially teach the same things. It's still going to teach that major thought reversal, but I'm going to expand on it and go deeper with it in the sales mechanism. At that point, when do the opt-in ads stop? So like, let's say January 1st, our webinar goes, or our video series or our live training starts January 1st. Cart doesn't open till the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
When do opt-in ads generally stop? What do you recommend? Because they don't stop on the 1st.
Yeah. And interestingly, with a lot of people that we've worked with, that's been the expectation, is as soon as cart opens, it's like, oh, shut off the video series. And that's a bad idea, because what we've seen a move towards is people more wanting to consume content when they want to consume it. So you're better off keeping opt-ins going probably until the second to last day of cart close, just because someone might opt in and then go through binge the entire series and then make a purchase. So don't ever stop your opt-in ads for your main sales mechanism until you can even wait till like cart close day. Like you could run it like almost all the way through. Like there's no way to logically reason against it. It's like if I'm an hour away from cart close, or let's say I'm 6 hours away from cart close and I'm scrolling through newsfeed and I don't know who you are, but I see an opt-in ad for your video series and I click on it and I watch it. And even though it was live in the Facebook group, let's say, but you have the replay page, I go through and watch every single one. And I'm like, man, this is incredible. I want this. This is hitting me right where, I know that I need this. I could make that purchase 3 hours left in cart close.
Yeah.
So like I would never stop your opt-in ads until, honestly, just thinking about it now, like I would need someone to strongly reason against keeping them. Like, no, you need to stop them because like you're going to be wasting money or something. Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like those opt-in ads should honestly at this point go through to like almost all the way through cart close. Maybe 6 hours before it officially closes, you'd jump in and kill those ads.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I will say, it's, as the business owner, when you're spending that much money, it's a little counterintuitive and scary, because you're like still spending money and you're like, no one's going to have, like you get in those thoughts. No one's going to have time to go through this.
What makes it scary though?
Well, for us specifically, we're spending $5,000 to $10,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone says, hey, let's run ads for 5 more days, you're literally talking about $25,000 to $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then during cart close, or the cart open period, and then you start getting to those thoughts of, well, are people really going to like watch it and buy? And they have a limited amount of time. And then it's also, for me, from a messaging standpoint, it gets a little scary because now you have convoluted messaging. It's always about right message to the right person at the right time. But when everything in the Facebook group and all your emails to everyone who opt in are all about cart close, cart close, cart close, and they haven't even watched the series yet, you start to get those thoughts like, this doesn't make any sense. They're not really seeing the right message at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that like I believe what you're saying.
Because it seems like those would be thoughts you'd have 2 months prior to as well. Very similar thoughts. Sounds like it's more coming from a place of fear than it is a place of any kind of rationality.
It is. Yeah. Well, I think it's a little bit of both. So like,
I just want to bust you out of this belief box is basically what I think is going on.
You gotta take my thought reversal course.
I think I'm giving you the thought reversal course.
Well, you could argue that way, like the beginning, it's like that in the beginning, but at the tail end of the launch, ad spend is fully scaled. So it's like the most you're going to be spending in a launch per a day is right around cart open, because your opt-in ad spend has been scaling. I guess you could technically turn it back or scale it back or something too.
You could, yeah, you technically could, but at the same time, I wouldn't look at it necessarily as a lifetime budget at that point. I would look at it as how many sales do we see coming in, and can we continue to run opt-in? So like, if we're like, whoa, we're like 8x right now, like this is definitely, because you're right. Like at cart open, you should be at your fullest daily spend.
Right.
But you should be able to, I mean, if we can agree that at least the first 2 days of cart open is something that you want to keep running for, then I would say that.
No, I agree with you.
Mhm.
And I'm just saying, it's, as the business owner, it is scary.
Oh,
Like
gotcha.
it's
Yeah.
just because you get all these fears of like, and you do have mixed messages at that point. So I would assume, and it would be interesting to get the data on this, if we took the conversion rate of people that opt in after cart open versus before, which one would be higher? I would imagine the one would be lower if we took the opt-ins after, because it is mixed messages. Like they could opt in and then all of a sudden an hour later get an email that says cart closing in 48 hours and they haven't even seen the video series yet. And they're like, what cart for what? They just don't know. However, if we look at it long-term too, those leads will still be valuable to you because sometimes people don't buy till launch 2, 3, or 4. So there's always going to get your value back. And I remember looking at this from our last client, the launch we just did with our most recent launch with the client. And we started looking at how many leads were coming in a day. And it was like 600 or something like that. But the way that the ad cost worked, they needed one sale out of every 600 opt-ins to break even. And when I look at that, I'm like, okay, cart's already open, 600 people a day are coming in. Will one of those buy even with all of those things? And the answer is like, yeah, of course. So it's still going to be profitable and it's still going to be valuable to run it. But as a business owner, it can, like, it gets scary because it's a lot of money. You know, like this next launch we're talking about running, you and Taylor wanted to spend $250,000 and the most we've ever spent on a launch is 100. So when I'm spending that much money, these fears start to come up. It's scary to like continue it to run. It almost feels like you're stopping. It's weird. It almost feels like you're stopping the bleeding is what it feels like you're doing. Like, I'm keeping the company safe, stopping the bleeding. But then after the sales start coming in and the launch is done, you always go like, should have spent more.
Yeah.
Should have spent more.
Yeah.
So I was just saying, it's just a mindset thing that a lot of business owners will have to get used to.
Yeah.
To try.
That's why it's cool not to own a business and just work for someone that does. Or like the kids that just get to throw stuff around and you have to deal with all the stress.
I know. I said our last retreat, you and Taylor were like, yeah, let's spend $250 on ad spend. I was like, hold on. This is $250,000.
And then we can work against you on it. Oh, is $250,000 a lot for Nike? Doesn't sound like it. So where are you working from, Brandon? Like, what is your mindset? Who are you being right now, Brandon? Who are you being in order to do the things that you need to do to have what you want to have?
Have you ever seen a multi-million-dollar launch that didn't spend $250,000? Exactly. I started thought reversing me on everything. Oh, classic. Okay, great. So last part of the funnel is cart open and close. Typically we usually for our stuff run about a four-day cart open in a video series. I'm sure webinars could be a little different, things like that. But let's just say we're doing a 4 or 5 day cart open period, enrollment period. What does the structure of the ads look like? Because there are cart open, like, hey, everyone get in, cart open. And then there's also 12 pays dropped. And then there's also cart close. So what does that structure look like? Like, how many days are we running cart open, 12 pay, cart close?
Yeah. So you and me probably differ a little bit on this. By the time you get to cart open, cart close, the selling should have been done.
Yep.
The ad creative or the marketing collateral, if you will, with messaging, the actual ad itself isn't going to be doing any heavy lifting and like overcoming objections.
Right.
Incentives like a 12 pay can be massively like beneficial. I come from an e-com background, and what we used to do is if someone went to check out with a physical product but didn't check out, they abandoned their cart, we set up a sequence that for 3 weeks, your first week we just ran ads to that said, hey, make sure that you come back and purchase, like don't miss out, you forgot to check out. Week 2 was, one time only, we're going to offer you 10% off this product, come check it out now, this isn't going to last. And then the third week was, this is your last offer, free shipping plus 10% off, this offer is going away soon, so don't miss out. And then we would exclude, after that week, we would completely exclude them from any remarketing ads and just dump them back into general remarketing with UT content. So incentives, I'm all like, definitely like the 12 pay structure and stuff, that can make a huge difference. But for me, partitioning out cart open ads and cart close ads that are run at different times on different days during a 4-day period, don't make as much of an impact as straight image ads or like parallax image ads or gift style ads, because at that point, again, most of the selling is done. You're just kind of reminding people that, like, hey, it's cart open, go and get in right now. Honestly, your email list should probably be doing most of the selling at that point. Like,
Yeah.
once that email goes out, that cart open is here, like that's where most people will probably purchase from. We do see our ads clean up a good amount because, unfortunately, as probably everyone knows, email open rates are just really low these
Well, it's
days.
just you want multiple messages everywhere. You don't want
Yeah.
to just depend on email. You don't want to depend just on ads
Yep.
because they could open an email and click over and
Mhm.
then just whatever. And then they see an ad. Like, I mean, I think the last client launch we did, we just wrapped up. I don't remember the actual numbers, but I think it was like almost 30 to 40% of the sales came last touch point was through the ads.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
that's so it's just, and they might have seen an email, they might have seen a social media post. So you don't want to depend on just one
Yep.
platform.
It's just their behavior on social media tends to be more action taking once they've been through and kind of already been pre-sold. So I would
Right.
say there's three different ads I would run. I would run some very short form video that isn't necessarily specific to cart open or cart close. It's more like, hey, the offer's here. I don't know how long, cart close, depending, or you could say, depending when you're seeing this ad, cart be closing in 5 minutes, or it could be closing in a couple days, but it's
Right.
closing soon. So make sure that you get in. I would always more lean towards the urgency there, more than like a cart open celebration.
Right.
And then the second type of ad would just be straight images or parallax. Then the third would be any incentive ads, a 12 pay that you launch, that you
Right.
let go of, or you send out, 2 days before cart closes, something like that.
And like Matt said, they don't have to be videos. They could
Mhm.
just be images and they could have text on the image, but you're really going to want to rely on the messaging around it, the headline of
Mhm.
the ad, and then a copy of the ad to really drive in that urgency. I would say that the most important one is probably, I mean, they all work together, obviously, but cart close, because there's so many people that wait to the last
Yeah.
minute. So if your cart close ads aren't using language that says like you're about to lose your opportunity in a few hours or
Mhm.
in a day or just a few minutes left or whatever it is, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. So
Yeah.
cart open's great. You might see some sales from it, but that urgency of like it's closing now needs to really happen on those cart close ads.
Yeah. 100%.
And then what happens is when they go to the sales page, messaging wise, the sales page, you want to continue that same messaging from the very start.
Yep.
So like when you look at our stuff, our big thought reversals are very much around how to content is and how to grow an audience fast. You're an unheard entrepreneur because of it, and you're stuck in this content circle of death. That's what a lot of our top funnel content talks about. That's what our warm up talks about. Our video series talks about it and goes even in more depth on it. The headline of our sales page literally says, stop the unheard entrepreneur trap you're stuck in and create the most engaging content you ever created without how-to content. Something along those lines,
Mhm.
which is the same theme that's gone all the way through the entire funnel. It's that cohesiveness that you were talking about, that cohesive funnel with messaging, with the right creative, with the right ads hitting at the right time. And keep in mind too, the emails that we're writing that people get during that experience, same messaging,
Mhm.
same everything. All of these things need to work together. You need to have the messaging, the right message, the right person at the right time with the right structure of the ads. And all of those external things help the ads convert.
Yeah.
Like you need to have the right offer. You need to have the right messaging. You need to, because if you don't, it doesn't matter how great your ad manager is, it's not going to convert.
100%. Yeah. A lot of people put a lot of faith in their ads managers, and ads managers. There's a lot of them. So it's tough to find the good ones. But I'm, like you just said, even still, like even the best ad manager in the world will never make up for poor messaging, poor creative, and poor offer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. I hear people
Jinx.
complain all the time. I can't talk.
What's that?
I can't talk.
What?
Jinx.
Oh, that's right. You owe me 10 Cokes.
Okay. Deal. But I've heard people, I've heard a lot of times that people complain about ad managers. They're like, I don't like this ad manager because they said I have to have a proven offer. The ad manager needs to help me like make my stuff convert. And it's like, yeah, no, they want a proven offer because they know how much work it takes to go find that offer, to find the messaging, to find the offer. I mean, it takes weeks or months. Sometimes it takes a lot of time. It takes a couple launches to really fine tune a lot of this stuff. And that's because, like I said at the beginning, the ads usually aren't the reason why your ads aren't converting. Like if your ads aren't converting, your funnel's not working, it might be the ads, but it most likely is the messaging, the offer, or something else going on there.
Yeah.
Cool. I know you do want to do a rapid fire session at the end here.
Yes.
So let's do that, and we'll wrap up this episode.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask you just a series of questions. I think it's going to be 10. I'm going to try and remember some. I've done these on a couple podcasts a while ago, and they end up being really fun. So I'm going to try and think of some, and I have a little bit of just a Google search here with some ideas. So the way that this will work is I'm going to ask you a question, and you are going to answer in 1 word to 5 words. You don't want I don't want a long answer. It's just very kind of rapid fire type vibe. Okay, cool. So what is the thing in life you're most grateful for?
Kids and family came up first.
Okay.
There's a lot though. Kids, family.
Okay. If you lost everything tomorrow, who would you call first? And let's assume you're with your family already.
James Wedmore.
Gotcha. Is there anything you consider absolutely unforgivable?
I want to say no, but you never know until you're in the moment. I would say no, but possibly if you like hurt or killed my family, I'd be pretty upset. That would be pretty unforgivable, I think.
You can only pick one. In making decisions, you follow either your heart or your head.
Heart. Easy. Come on, give me some hard ones.
If you could change anything about the way you were raised, what would it be?
Nothing.
What's one thing you always procrastinate on?
Everything.
Okay, and last question.
Everything.
Assuming this is a huge nod to James Lipton. If anyone knows who he is, this is directly from his Inside the Actors studio, I believe it was. If there is a God, and he does exist, when you get to the pearly gates, what would you want to hear him say to you as you enter in?
Assuming I'm getting in?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay. It is a tough question. And so I think my first answer, honestly, it's going to sound weird, is like, I don't really care what he says because I feel so fulfilled in the work that I'm already doing. I'm like, I don't need an external validation from God to like know that I'm doing good work. But if I had to choose something, I would say you did good work and you helped a lot of people. Like it was awesome to see what you created, I think is what I would be there. But to be honest with you, I don't really care. I don't need that external validation. And like, I love the work that I do and I'm proud of what I've created. And so, yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but
there is no right or wrong answer. I'm not looking for any answer.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Take it away.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully this is super value adding for you guys. What I want you to do is take your biggest golden nugget, share it on IG stories and tag at I am Brandon Lucero. And what we're going to do is we're going to pick, my team will pick their favorite one and you guys get a $25 gift card to either Starbucks or Amazon. By the way, we've done this on the last few episodes and there's only been a handful of people doing it. So you have a really good chance of winning that gift card. And you know what? We're going to make this one $50.
Wow.
So that's a lot of cheeseburgers or never mind. Starbucks doesn't serve cheeseburgers. That's a lot of coffees.
Awkward. This is a terrible way to end this episode on some weird cheeseburger comment. Wow.
Well, maybe this is going to be someone's biggest breakthrough. So anyways, go share that right now. And if you haven't yet, leave us a review and we'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace out. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.